So while everyone is focused on the N64 coming to the Nintendo Switch's online service, people seem to be forgetting there's another console coming too, and it's the Sega Genesis. Now the Sega Genesis is one of my favorite consoles of all time. It was the first console I got that was a brand new console. I have so many fond memories of playing it during the 16-bit era, and it's just a timeless piece of machinery. Now the Sega Genesis is well represented on the Nintendo Switch already. Unlike things like the N64 and the Game Boy, you could play a ton of Sega Genesis games, whether it's via the Sega Ages collection or the Sega Genesis Classics collection, and then of course the upcoming additions to the Nintendo Switch Online service. But I managed to find 10 games that I think need to be added to the Nintendo Switch's online service for the Sega Genesis that you can currently not play on the Nintendo Switch at all. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. So if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, be sure to like and share the video. But without any further ado, let's talk about 10 games we need for the Sega Genesis when it comes to the Nintendo Switch Online service. The first game we're going to talk about is one of my favorite games on the platform, and that is Rocket Knight Adventures. Now, this is a really interesting game because of the fact that, well, you play as like a possum. Yeah, you know, you got your little tail and stuff like that. You use it to hang down from trees and other sorts of limbs that you come across in the game, but the possum manages to be cool in this game, and Rocket Knight Adventures is an amazing game. Now, of course, this game also released on the Super Nintendo with the Sparkster tag, and then Sparkster ended up coming to the Sega Genesis as well. But the first game in the series is just like beyond belief when it comes to looking at the game. The character sprites are huge, the action platforming is very fast and very tight, and most importantly, it's just a really fun game. It really assaults you in terms of visuals, and of course the music in the game is stellar as well. You have a cool little ability where you can charge up your rocket sword and then like fly across the level, like going in all sorts of different directions that you can use for things like traversal or just taking down enemies. It's a pretty challenging game, don't get me wrong, but I think this is one of the standout 2D platformers, one of the best platforming games of all time, and it's a shame that there's a huge generation of people who don't know what Rocket Knight Adventures is, or maybe they played the Xbox 360 version of the game that came out, which was absolutely terrible. I think Rocket Knight Adventures is a must-have for the Nintendo Switch Online service because it's one of the best Sega Genesis games of all time. Next up is an arcade classic that surprisingly isn't available on the Nintendo Switch with Ms. Pac-Man. Now, I love the Sega Genesis version of Ms. Pac-Man. It was made by Tengen? I never know how to say that, but this was one of the best games for the Sega Genesis if you're a fan of arcade ports because it's a very accurate arcade port. Now, of course, I mean, it is just Ms. Pac-Man. How hard could it be to mess it up? But still, there's been some weird Pac-Man games that have released on consoles. Ms. Pac-Man is a little bit better than the original Pac-Man in my opinion because it just feels a little bit faster. It's a little bit more fluid when you're moving throughout the maze-like levels. And I mean, it's Pac-Man. Who doesn't love Pac-Man? I think Ms. Pac-Man is a great Sega Genesis game and would make a great addition to the Nintendo Switch's library. Another platformer I feel like we need on these Sega Genesis games for the Switch has to be Pulseman. Now, Pulseman is interesting because it was made by Game Freak. Yes, that Game Freak, but there's no Pokemon to be found with this game. This is actually an action platformer game. Now, at first you might think it's kind of like Mega Man, and it does sort of give off some Mega Man vibes in terms of the aesthetic, but really I think it's more like Sonic the Hedgehog, like cosplaying as Mega Man on a Sega Genesis game. It's a really good looking game too. I would say it's one of the best looking Sega Genesis games, but it can be a little bit on the challenging side. 3 hits and you're dead, so you know you have to factor that in when you're playing throughout these different levels. I really like the vibe of the game though. The music is really good, and I think the industrial setting sort of makes it stand out apart from other platform games at the time. Pulseman actually never officially released in the US as far as releasing on the Sega Genesis. It has been included on a couple different compilations. It was also available on the Virtual Console for the Nintendo Wii, but still it's sort of a hidden gem of a game because it never got a worldwide release, at least in the United States, so I think Pulseman would be another great addition. You can't really talk about action games without talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as those were some of the best games of all time, starting with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 on the NES. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Hyperstone Heist, is available on the Sega Genesis, and it's kind of weird. It's a kind of a weird game, but I still think it's very important, and I still think it's a lot of fun. Now, yes, the game is based on Turtles in Time, but it doesn't have the amount of levels that Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo has. Instead, it just extends 5 of the levels to play longer, so you're seeing different things and you're encountering different things within these longer levels, so it does set it a bit apart from Turtles in Time. Of course, you have your 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you're trying to stop Shredder. Like, it's not a groundbreaking narrative or anything like that, but being able to play this game with the online portion of it, I think would be a lot of fun. You know, playing through this game with a friend who's playing on the Nintendo Switch's online service, like, that would be absolutely awesome. Obviously, there is some licensing stuff with Ninja Turtles, but I mean, if Arcade 1UP could get the Ninja Turtles license, Nintendo can more than get the license for this game and add it to the Switch's online service. Another game that never officially released during the heyday of the Sega Genesis in North America, at least in cartridge form, was of course Mega Man The Wily Wars. Now, it's been re-released by Capcom, and I believe Retrobit did it with a nice cartridge, but still, I think Mega Man The Wily Wars would be a great game to add to the Nintendo Switch's online service. Now, this is a remake of the first 3 Mega Man games that of course released on the NES, and there is a new game mode called the Wily Tower, which you can only unlock with a completed save file in the game. I think it's a lot of fun, you know, it's Mega Man. It feels a little bit different than the NES games, obviously because these are 16-bit renditions, but I think for the most part they did a really good job with these games. They're still classic games, and giving them a fresh coat of paint is a really good thing in my opinion. I think the Wily Wars needs a larger audience. It was available on things like the Sega Genesis Mini, but still, I want this game to be worldwide. I want everyone with a Nintendo Switch to be able to check out this game, so add it to the service. The next game on my list is definitely the most controversial game on this list, but it's a game that I still think is really good. It's just sort of different than its predecessors, and that is Splatterhouse III. Now, Splatterhouse 1 and 2 were just basically side-scrolling action platform games, which you would just do is pretty much played like a beat-em-up, but Splatterhouse 3 really just went in a different direction with more of a free roam aspect where you could go from room to room at your leisure, taking out the enemies as long as you did it within the time limit. It plays a lot different than the first 2 Splatterhouse games, and the first game is available on the Namco Museum Collection currently on the Nintendo Switch, but I never really understood the hate for Splatterhouse 3. I think it's cool, like there's cool little drawn cutscenes and stuff that sort of draw you in, and once you figure out how to play the game, like it can be a lot of fun. There's a lot of gross enemies that you encounter, a very challenging game, but still a very fun and satisfying game. Splatterhouse 3 is a complete hidden gem, I don't care what anyone says, and needs to be on the Switch Online service. Most 2D platformers for the Sega Genesis had a mascot who was pretty much designed for a younger audience in mind, but Earthworm Jim came along and was like, no, we're gonna do something a little bit different. We're gonna go for that teenage, early adult crowd, and I think it worked, and I think it's a fantastic game. Earthworm Jim, of course, has you playing as an earthworm named Jim who gets into a spacesuit, and then he gets to be able to whip his head in order to take out enemies or use different guns. The levels themselves are extremely creative. The humor in the game is spot on and very funny, and really it's one of the best sounding Sega Genesis games in my opinion, just because of the fact that that sort of muddy Sega Genesis sound that you hear in so many titles actually sort of works in its benefit in this game, especially when like you're fighting the guy with the little conveyor belt and he's like belching and throwing fish at you and stuff and you have to beat him. Like, I think the sound effects for that really are in tune with the Sega Genesis's sound chip. The later levels in the game are super fun as well. There's a ton of creativity. It's just an excellent game, and I think that it's actually better than its sequel that came out because it has all of the charm and it doesn't really try to deviate too far from that format. Earthworm Jim is a fantastic game and definitely is a game I'd like to see on the Sega Genesis Online. So I figured I had to have one fighting game on my list, and I was kind of going between Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, but I'm going to go with Street Fighter II Champion Edition to be added to the service because, I mean, it's Street Fighter II. Like, Street Fighter II is timeless in my opinion. It plays great. It's still super fun with all the different characters and whatnot, and I think Street Fighter II Champion Edition is a solid version of Street Fighter II, especially considering the fact that you can do all the hyper mode stuff that you could do in the second game released on the Super Nintendo within this game. You can adjust the speed settings. It's just a really fun game. It's a game that I would like to play with my friends online, so yeah, there's the fighting game for the list. Usually when you think of Treasure, you think of Gunstar Heroes, which of course is one of the best Sega Genesis games of all time. But did you know that they also did sort of an action-adventure RPG game called Light Crusader? And If you did know that, well, hey, you would know why I would want Light Crusader on the Sega Genesis Online service. I think Light Crusader is a really good looking game. It takes place in an isometric perspective, which some people won't like, and yes, it can be a little bit dodgy when you're doing things like platforming and fighting enemies in the game, but once you sort of understand how the isometric view works in this game, it's a really fun action adventure game with RPG elements. You know, there's a lot of different enemy types to take out, there's large labyrinths to explore, there's big boss battles, you know, pretty much everything a style of this game needs in order for it to be a lot of fun. And I think Light Crusader is definitely an underrated treasure game because of the fact that everyone just talks about Gunstar Heroes. You gotta have some games with some longevity to them, and Light Crusader is definitely a game that you could sink a lot of time into. And of course, the final game we're going to talk about is Sonic the Hedgehog 3 because, well, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is not available on the Sega Genesis. Of course, about 10 or so years ago, this game just completely disappeared off of different compilations. All of a sudden, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 wasn't on any of these Sega compilations, and nobody could really figure out why until you sort of dug deeper into the story. I've told this story a million times, but I'll tell it 1,000,001 times. Michael Jackson was instrumental in creating the music for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Now, he went uncredited, but that's why a lot of the songs in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 literally sound like something that Michael Jackson would be singing over, especially during that time frame. So when Michael Jackson passed away, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 got caught up in the legal estate of Mr. Jackson, and then it was very hard to re-release this game because of his alleged involvement in it. But now it seems like that has been cleared up, as Sonic Origins, whenever that's coming out, will have Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on it. But that's cool, and I understand that that's coming out eventually, but I feel like they could beat him to the punch and put Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on the Genesis service. Obviously, this enhanced version in the Sonic Origins collection is going to have things like widescreen and whatnot, and that's cool. That's going to be a great way to experience the game, but I would also like to be able to experience the base game as well, and maybe somebody comes along, plays Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on the Sega Genesis Online service, and then wants to pick up the Sonic Origins collection to get a little bit more out of the game. So it makes perfect sense to me. It's definitely time for Sonic 3 to see a resurgence, as it's a beautiful looking game, a beautiful playing game, just bigger, better, and badder than its predecessors, and an all-time classic. Alrighty, so those were 10 Sega Genesis games that are currently unavailable to play on the Nintendo Switch in any way, shape, or form that I would like to see come to the service. I wanted to include Aladdin on there too, but I mean, Aladdin's already on there and stuff like that. Lion King's already on there with the double pack, and now Jungle Book's coming. I've never even played Jungle Book. I don't know if it's good, but I will check it out when it releases. But let me know in the comment section down below what Sega Genesis games you would like to see added to the Switch Online service. I guess they can be available by other means if they're on the 50 games that are available through the Sega Genesis Classic Collection. That's cool. I'm not going to be mad at you for doing it. I just wanted to think a little bit outside of the box with my list. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like and share the video as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.